Hello and welcome to part one of what's this called? Yeah, the 88 Supercar Challenge. I'm breaking this up into multiple parts and things. You'll figure it out. But basically, I'm just going to cover the automation side of things, and then let my test driver take care of the BeamNG drive side of it, and hopefully it'll work out and make for a much better viewing experience than past challenges. But enough with that. First entry is from Armour Motors. It's called the Roadhawk, and yeah, I think it's quite a good looking car. I gave it a 8 out of 10 for styling. I think just overall it suits the theme of being an 80 supercar. Looks a lot more like a concept car to me, but I still think that works. It's just nice and clean, got some nice good lines. I do like the fact that it's using the sort of shooting brake Corvette design, or the body even. I do have a couple of complaints with it. Personally, not too much of a fan of this front grille setup, but it does work for an 80s car. I think at the back of it, this back section here, which while I do like the way that it's done, these are just two fixtures, and then it's using a grille in the background here, and then overlaid using like bumper bars with your fuel cap in the middle. I do like the way that that's done, but I think it's just a bit simplistic, especially for something that does look like a concept car. I think it does just look a little plain, if that makes sense. So I think, yeah, just it's almost a bit too clean in the way that it looks. It's not quite outlandish enough for an 80 supercar, but yeah, still 8 out of 10. Moving on to the chassis, aluminium panels, and then pretty standard stuff. Expect to see this quite a lot, but it is front engined, which is basically the biggest differentiator between cars in this. It's got a big and very advanced V8, 5.5 litre, well 5.4 litres, and a fair amount of power here. Again, dual overhead cam, 4-valve, aluminium block and head. Expect to see that a lot. Does have some forged internals to try and cope with all the power and torque. Fairly standard setup, quite low compression, but it is running quite a lot of boost. 1.09 bar is quite a lot. Interestingly, I mean, the turbos does sort of spool up kind of late, 3,400, 500 RPM. It's kind of late for a turbo setup, but it is a high power setup, so that is understandable. Intercooler is restricting power a bit. I did a bit of messing around with the intercooler exhaust, just sort of seeing how restricted it was, and I did end up getting something like 570 horsepower out of it, just by, I think, increasing the intercooler, and the exhaust didn't even touch like the turbo setup. I don't think. I might have done a bit, but yeah, point is that it is sort of limiting a bit, but by doing that you do reduce sort of the low end power, so maybe this is a nice compromise. It has a performance intake and running on super. The only really notable thing here is low ignition time, and like under 50, especially for a supercar, is kind of odd. So not sure what that's about. I suppose it is, yeah, running, don't know, quite low compression, so it suddenly needs to compromise somewhere, and I guess that's it. And then, yeah, it's decently quiet. I mean, 30 actually for a sports car, a supercar rather. Yeah, that's quite impressive. And dual exhaust with a reverse flow and baffled. It's done quite a lot to try and keep it quiet, but also some negative quality there. Loads of body quality, which explains its prestige of 82.6, which, yeah, rather impressive. I think it's the second highest car we've got submitted. I would check, but I don't have access to an internet connection right now. So you might be seeing this like a week or two after I upload this. Yeah, my internet's died, so I don't know. Well, I'll figure it out and get this somehow. Yeah. 82.6 prestige and 57.6 sportiness, both very good stats. Out of the things with scoring and automation, the only thing that really is a bit lackluster is top speed, 189 miles per hour. I do wonder if it's something to do with the body being quite draggy, because it definitely has the power to go faster. In fact, so excuse me, yeah, 3.7 drag coefficient, 0.37, I should say. That is quite draggy, so that explains the top speed. Yeah, really, with like 500 horsepower, you'd be sort of looking more at least 190, 195 even. So yeah, but what it does lack in top speed, it does make up for an acceleration, 3.3 seconds to 60, and it is all-wheel drive, which explains that, with very wide tyres, 275s front and rear, with a lot of tyre quality as well. Brakes are very sporty, just going for 2 pistons, but very aggressive pad type. Very little brake fade, and yeah, it does get stopped very quickly thanks to those wide tyres. Also has quite a lot of downforce, which is interesting because I cannot for the life of me figure out where it is. I figured it would be something like a wing hidden under these, or lots of wings, but nope. So I have no idea where they're hidden. So wondering if they're diffusers or something. But yeah, I don't know. Wherever they're hidden, well done, because I can't find them. But there is definitely something there, because you can adjust the wing angle. It's quite a bit of quality there too, and you've still got all that drag. I suppose the fact that it doesn't have an under tray of any sort is holding it back. But there we go. Very fancy high-end interior. And then, interestingly, it's only got hydraulic power steering rather than variable hydraulic. It sort of hurts sportiness a bit. So, it's an interesting choice. Although I suppose variable hydraulic's a bit heavier. So, I don't know. I don't know if those 3 kilograms are worth the, 1.3 stat difference. But there we go. And very low safety quality. Just getting it above the minimum to reduce weight. And then anything really notable about the suspension, I believe it was, where is it set up? Yeah, somewhere between sportiness and comfort. I'm pretty sure. And yeah, I don't know. It's somewhere about between there, to be honest, with the way the lines line up. But yeah, anything notable here really is quite soft front sway bar. Gives it quite good turn in though. It is literally, well, it's sort of oversteer for most of it, because it's all-wheel drive, but yeah, once it gets onto that line right at the edge, it really helps explain that quite high sportiness stat. So overall then, yeah, this looks to be a good competitor. It's got decent performance, great acceleration. Around the course it should be good too, since it's turbocharged. So just hopefully it isn't too thirsty, which it doesn't really seem to me. It's, I guess, like a good 22 miles to the gallon. And all that, although I'm not sure how well that translates to BeamNG. So yeah, this will probably just be limited by time rather than fuel. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Yeah. Next up from Aisha, the JKPM Tokachi X-Type. I should have really thought about how to pronounce that before I just jumped into this, but there we go. Yeah, this is the opposite end of well, not really a total opposite, but it's quite different, isn't it? It's a pickup truck, which I know some of you might think, well, that's not really a supercar, but it's sort of that GM Cyclone, or to give a current example, Ford Raptor, sort of super pickup. And I think it still fits the theme of like a big, outlandish, sort of good performance car. Although I think this sort of falls short on the performance side. 240 horsepower. It is actually a bit lighter than some of the other cars at 1,300 kilograms. But yeah, I think it's going to struggle performance-wise with a lot of these cars. Anyway, let's talk about the styling. So I think it actually does a good job of looking like a late 80s pickup truck. At first I sort of assumed it was American, but actually thinking about the name, that's definitely Japanese. So yeah, maybe taking into account that, maybe not so much, but I still gave it a 7. Just because I think it does do a good job of looking 80s, big, intimidating, slightly outlandish. It's obviously a sporty variant with the bonnet scoop and the splitter and the little spoiler at the back there. And I do like just all the details, the auxiliary lamps, but also things like having the lock on the fuel cap, although they have accidentally mirrored it, and just all the badging and the nice details. It does, I think it looks very complete. I do like that. This bull bar bit here. I mean, I'm a sucker for like bull bars and bash bars and things, so yeah, I think this it's a very good job at styling it. It's not the most pretty thing though. I think it was just sort of maybe look slightly more streamlined or something. I'm not sure how possible a bed cover actually is. I should look into trying that. Maybe you could do something with a mud flap. I don't know if that'd be pushing it, to be honest. Although there might be a fixture or something you do. Anyway, yeah, think about that later. But yeah, if it was maybe somehow looked a bit more GMC Cyclone, I guess, is what I was thinking of, like a road performance pickup. But yeah, I still think it's very good in terms of styling. If we look underneath though, this is definitely a dedicated chassis and not based on a pickup. Double wishbones front and rear, and then aluminium panels. I suppose that's believable as like a variant, even though the way automation works you can't do that. Yeah, then we get to the engine, which at first, like a 2.8 litre, although this has been de-stroked to 2.7. Yeah, I'd be willing to believe that's like a pickup truck sort of engine, but it's all aluminium, dual overhead cam, 4-valve, and that just doesn't really sit right with me as like sort of a law excuse or a company excuse. So yeah, it's a bit odd. It does at least have a very nice wide and flat power curve. It doesn't have as much power, but it is all very usable. I mean, there's like 2,000 RPM here, where it's all basically above 220 horsepower. It's amazing. Not quite 2,000. Yeah, above 2,000. But yeah, it's got very low compression ratio, which I assume is to help run it without a catalytic converter, which makes sense. I mean, if the rules allow you to get away without one, might as well try. Turbo itself, very restricted, as you can see. It does spool up quick, especially for an inline 4. 2,600 RPM, and it's all spooled up, which for 80s turbo tech, and automation 80s turbo tech, actually, yeah, it's very good. And then the rest of it, I mean, there's not really too much to talk about. It's a very lean mix, with quite high ignition timing, which, yeah, sort of explains the very low compression. Also is running a fair amount of boost, 0.9 bar. But yeah, and a massive exhaust. Only a bit of body quality. It's got a viscous diff, and it is rear-wheel drive. Interestingly, it has loads of overdrive. Just not sure why they did bother gearing it so long. I suppose wheel spin is a bit of an issue, but if we just sort of look at it, I mean, shorting it should, in theory. Maybe it isn't. But I would have thought it would have helped a bit. Maybe it makes sense then for fuel economy reasons. I don't know. Although I doubt my driver is going to be using an overdrive gear in this. So doesn't really make a difference. Tyres are slightly staggered, interestingly. I suppose to help with oversteer a bit, although you are sacrificing a bit of cornering. And when most of the track is basically hairpin turns, although there are a couple of high-speed turns, yeah, you sort of wonder how useful having that stagger to keep it stable is. Yeah. Anything else to say? No, not really. Vented discs front and rear, with quite big brakes. Interestingly, the front brakes don't lock up at high speed. Not really sure like why they didn't go a bit bigger. Although, to be fair, there's no brake fit, and when are you really going to be braking at the very top end? Although I don't know how good accelerating this is. Maybe this actually gets up to that speed fairly easily. It does have 80 kg of downforce total, thanks to some quite high wing angle, which is quite impressive considering it's just lips. I believe one there, and then you've just got a spoiler there. So yeah, that setup is quite impressive actually. Although kind of draggy, and actually they'll have no effect in BeamNG thinking about it. Because in BeamNG it only counts wings, so bit of a problem. But it makes for some good automation stats, I suppose. Although, yeah, clearly hasn't helped sportiness enough there. 17.7. Prestige is alright since it's a big vehicle. But it doesn't, it's an inline 4. It's only got premium interior rather than something really high end. So, yeah, it's going to suffer in that regard. Take a look. Basic 80s safety. There's still loads of room to pull down quality even further. Could maybe pull out even more weight. And yeah, it does have ABS and variable hydraulic power steering. Progressive springs, and yeah, pretty standard damper setup there. And yeah, just relatively stiff suspension. I believe this was set up around drivability, which makes sense, I suppose, for a sub-performance pickup like this. But yeah, I am interested to see how this performs, just because low top speed, it only does 125. But it does still have decent enough acceleration, so maybe by it being a bit slower it becomes easier to drive somehow. And it is still light, so it does get stopped in decent time. So I am interested to see if this does beat any other vehicles. Maybe it's a bit of a wild card. I don't expect to see this fighting for the top just on that top speed stat alone. Although sportiness as well, I think, has brought that out of the fight personally, but we'll have to see. From Bowtie, we have the Stealthwind XS80-R. Don't know why I said the dash there. Yeah, anyway, yeah, we're going to focus on the back because that's the best looking part of this car. Yeah, sort of the back of it, I think, has got some cool ideas. I really like sort of this, I'm sure what to call it, like you see it on like some sort of 80s and 90s supercars, and even like the Subaru ASX, not ASX, SVX, that's the one. Yeah, and things like that, where it's got like this little window there to yeah, just like a smaller window, I guess. So that's a nice detail. I've spent far too much time talking about that, but there we go. Yeah, then at the back, this lighting arrangement, it's interesting. It's done in a slightly interesting way, I think. It's done using sunroof fixtures and then this headlight, which wasn't how I was expecting it to be done. But it does actually work out kind of neat. I think it's almost a little too overwhelming. I think maybe, I don't know. And also like the way it's spaced out a bit, it seems weird to have these massive reverse lights and then sort of the smaller indicators and things like that. I don't know. The way the wing sort of covers it, don't think it's particularly well thought out. It's a bit extreme though, so I suppose it fits as a supercar like that. But then yeah, so the front of it, I don't think it's particularly consistent with the back. It's a mid-engine car, but it has loads and loads of grille at the front. Like, that's way too much. Even if it's got a radiator up there, you don't need all that. And yeah, this sort of vent there, more vents there, which I'd accept as, like, I don't know, maybe rerouting from there. But no, it does look a bit odd. So a bit too far forward to have it be air from the wheel arch. Yeah, I do think the back of it has some nice ideas. This vent here is done in a nice way. What's this, another sunroof? I think? Potentially? Yeah, the preview's not going to load. Oh, it's a badge. There we go. Yeah, so styling wise it tries, and to be honest I think fails. So we got a 4 out of 10 for styling. Anyway, going on to the chassis, you know, it's maximum prestige setup, I guess. Corrosion resistant steel being the only thing of note there, and I guess it's mid-transverse, so that's sort of interesting. First naturally aspirated car we've had, although this is only car 3. 4.3 litre all aluminium dual overhead cam V8. As I said, expect to see that sort of setup a lot. It is flat plane though, with forged internals. I don't know why I clicked that there. Yeah, and it does. I think it does need them. Wow, this is being slow. It's going to crash on me now. No, it did survive. Yeah, no, it does need it. Interestingly, only using 95 RON, actually. I'm glad I did that. That reminded me. Yeah, yeah, only using 95 rather than 98. Not sure what that's about, because the rest of this is really set up to be a racing car. You can see maximum cam profile, even though it does get you a bit more power to back it off a bit. Sort of, you make less sort of top end power. So I don't really know. I haven't really experimented enough with this. Maybe you get enough power up here to make up for the loss there, and you get a better average power across the peak. I'm not too sure about that. Maybe they spent time and worked that out. But yeah, in my eyes at least, that does look a bit. It seems a bit weird to not go for peak power, especially when top speed is a scored stat. But yeah, as I said, racing intake, but only premium 95, a very aggressive fuel mixture. Sort of middle of the road ignition timing, what I expect to sort of optimize power is that sort of setup. And then yeah, it revs decently high, really only limited by just RPM drop off, or power drop off rather. And then yeah, exhaust setup, fairly standard long tubular, I guess, because they're a bit lighter and it's not exactly limited by headers. Yeah, it's still pretty loud even though it's got a reverse flow on there. So that's interesting. Top speed is, what is it? It's like 100. I've got it next to me, 184. And yeah, I did have a look at adjusting the gearing. Doesn't really change anything. Spacing left at 50 means that yeah, it's really lacking acceleration. You know, I know it's quite heavy given the power. 1,400 kilograms with only 430 horsepower. I say only, and still insane, but yeah, 5.8 seconds. I think just adjusting the spacing a bit, bringing it up, because it doesn't have enough power to like really overwhelm the wheels with this sort of gearing setup. So if we just sort of look at adjusting it there, you can see already pulling time off, and wheel spin isn't going crazy. So I do think, yeah, you can see that pulled like a full second off just by adjusting the spacing a bit. So I do think it's overgeared. Maybe the setup it's got will help it at higher speeds. I'm not too sure, and actually I should have checked to see how that affected sportiness and things. Yeah, maybe that does help. Again, I can't say for everything. What I can say is this looks like a nightmare. Terminal oversteer at low speed, and it is the same for high speed. I think it's just because the gap, the tyre stagger, isn't enough really. I usually go for a rule of 4 sizes difference on mid-engine cars. And if we look at suspension, it's got more camber up front. It's got stiffer rear sway bar. It is quite stiff overall. So yeah, that's just asking for oversteer, really. Alloy wheels, 20-inch wheels, which are massive, and yeah, they do sort of stand out there, don't they? Well, once you notice that they're 20 inches, yeah, they do look a bit ridiculous, I think. But yeah, that's a bit odd, but I mean it works. Braking, this car has loads of front end grip once it starts braking at high speed. It does have over 200 kilogram of downforce thanks to quite a lot of wing angle. It's there, it just lips at the front, but still, yeah, quite a lot. But interestingly, no pad type. I don't quite get this setup, because it would be lighter to go with smaller pads. It's like you could go a bit more aggressive on the pad type, I think, because there's still a bit of comfort left over. 20 was the minimum but it didn't mean you had to go like miles over it, which, you know, they're only at 20.7. So yeah, and yeah, I've already commented high speed oversteer. That seemed like it's going to be bad in BeamNG. Interior is quite low spec as well. Only premium and a standard cassette. Seems sort of cheap for a supercar. And then safety setup, just apply it all the weight you can. I've noticed it's usually better to go for a standard and then with negative quality than it is to go for a basic with negative quality. You tend to lose more weight with the same amount of safety. So just like a tip there, I guess. And also, yeah, it's got ABS, variable hydraulic, air suspension and adaptive dampers. It's quite high in there, but yeah, you can sort of see the setup. I assume it's using one of the presets because I think automation likes to run this sort of camber setup. Yeah, very low roll angle as well, and like minimum ride height. This does look to be a little sketchy to drive. Maybe it'll be okay. You know, I'll have to see what my test driver thinks of it. But yeah, sort of, it's got decent enough stats at least. You know, 57 and 51 basically. I guess it ranges to for sportiness and prestige. So that's decent at least. But yeah, this car has some really odd choices in terms of setup, and yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see how it does in terms of scoring, but I have a feeling this won't do too well. From Ludo66X, sub to Bay. I approve of the name. Which, yeah, that's unfortunately probably the best part about this car. Well, I've started off brutal. Yeah, no, this styling wise, I don't think it really fits as a supercar. It's using the smaller NSX body, which I think does look a bit odd for the time period. Supercars were big and outlandish. I think sort of most of the cars so far have fitted that. They are big, attention-grabbing sort of vehicles, but yeah, this sort of a bit smaller. Does have pop-up headlights. I suppose that's appropriate. And I think the front end overall actually isn't too bad. I think it has a couple of weird things like these sort of fog lights here, but I think the idea of the pop-ups with these lights sort of works. Yeah, does have an intercooler with natural, even though it's naturally aspirated, which a bit odd. But I think that's because the previous version was was turbocharged and they just forgot to remove it. But yeah, from the side, I think this is going to be slightly odd. It does look a bit too modern almost with those wheels and sort of these smaller mirrors. They're sort of quite streamlined looking. I know it is the NSX body, so it's sort of something you've got to fight with because it is more of a 90s car. But yeah, I think in that regard, maybe just a bit too modern. Although I suppose things like the MX-5 existed, but again, that's a lower class vehicle, is the issue. From the back, though, yeah, this just doesn't work at all. The body doesn't really flow, or the fixtures don't really work with the body lines in any way. There's no real flow. I do like the engine cover, or the sort of grille there is sort of like a glass cover, but I don't think that redeems it for the rest of the back. I think if the back was sort of to this sort of standard, I could see myself giving it like a 3 out of 10. But I'll be honest, this is, yeah, takes it down another point just because of how badly it works. I think maybe if it had some more sort of use the different fixtures, because there's a couple of triangle taillight things, and I think that could possibly help it blend, or even using like a circle fixture to help it meet with the body lines here. I think that would help, but yeah, just sort of trying to help a bit. But I do like at least that they've got all the badging there. That's something easy to miss. I mean, you know what? I'm a shill. I'm gonna zoom right into that. And yeah, reminder. Let's go and take a look underneath now. This is fiberglass panels, which is again sort of a cheaper, more kit car almost sort of approach to this, with corrosion resistant steel, mid transverse again, and double wishbones front and rear. Has an all aluminium dual overhead cam 4 litre V8, makes 377 horsepower. It's a bit odd actually how it's something like 60 horsepower down on the last car, even though it's only 300cc less, which is a bit weird. I mean, it's missing a race intake, so fair enough. But yeah, again, a very sort of race setup there. Like going billet steel, there's a bit overkill. Yeah, sort of. Although it saves a bit of weight, I guess, and if you can afford it, go for it, right? Make it lighter. But yeah, sort of cam profile more optimized for power, I guess, than the last car. Actually, a very similar compression ratio. These engines are very similar. Very aggressive fuel mixture again. Ignition timing, I assume again trying to optimize for power, especially because this has more fuel octane, running on 95. Doesn't have a race intake though, only performance, which again seems sensible. Yeah, it does rev high. Actually, sort of, kind of has a decently wide power band here, I guess. Sort of, yeah, there's a good sort of 1000 RPM up there to work with, I guess. Not too peaky considering the high cam profile. Yeah, for some reason it's got short cast headers. Again, I wonder if that's because when I originally got this car sent in, it was a turbo, and just forgot to switch it to sound like long tubulars. But you can see in the flow bench, headers are just very restricted. Same with the exhaust, but that's more understandable. 2 reverse flows and catalytic converter. What was I going to look at? Yeah, it is quite quiet though for a naturally aspirated engine, with a big exhaust at 35 loudness. So yeah, that is sort of understandable, I guess. But yeah, just a bit odd with like the headers and things. But there we go. Despite the power loss though, I mean, I know it's 250 kilograms lighter, near enough. It is quite a bit quicker. I think that's just due to some proper gearing. Interestingly, it can actually, right, what is it, 194? You can actually increase the top speed a bit. You can see the red line moving back. Yeah, I think it was just geared, just top speed set a little too low. Ideally, you want the red line to be where your max power is, or, you know, adjust it so it's closer to it. Because that's when you're, because you want the most power to reach the highest speed. And yeah, sort of gearing setup, trying to control wheel spin, but also get that second gear as close to 62 miles an hour as possible, because that's how you get quick figures. So yeah, pretty good setup, and actually it's reflected in the sportiness. The gearing and things, I think, is a good setup. And yeah, again, handling wise, quite narrow tyres, especially for this much power. Probably explains the wheel spin a bit. 180 and 220. Interesting not to have numbers ending in 5 as well. But there we go. If it works, it works, I guess. Maybe it was finely tuned for that. Yeah, anyway, right along this line, you can like tweak it a bit, I guess. But in terms of automation stats, that's very good for sportiness. Interestingly, fair bit of quality on the tyres. These brakes are absolutely overkill though. You can sort of see the tyre sizes are limiting braking power. It stops a bit slower than some of the other cars. I think partly because it doesn't have any downforce, but also, yeah, it does have a bit of downforce, but not enough to really influence these lines, as you can see. So yeah, I think it just these brakes are just insane. Also, interestingly, solid discs up front, but vented in the rear. Potentially save a bit of weight by going vented front. I think, yeah, just bring down these brake sizes, or give it more comfortable pads. I know it's controlling brake fade, but I have a feeling that we could like shrink these way down and they'd still be fine. Just because of just how overkill they are. You know, 3 pistons, vented discs on the back, they aren't going to fade especially with this setup. Yeah, very sort of low drag setup, fully clad. Definitely, I'd say setup trying to get good top speed, +7 quality, which probably explains that top speed actually. How it is so quick with fairly little power, to be fair. It's only getting 335 to the wheels, and what, that's 370 something, 377 I think it was, at the crank, and yeah, is going to 187 according to the stats that I've recorded. Yeah, that's good. Not a lot of downforce. Really, that's sort of, I'm not really sure how much of a difference 26 kilograms or 25 kilograms makes. But considering we're probably not going to spend a lot of time cornering it much higher than, so 60 or whatever on this course, especially given these tyre sizes, although it does pull a lot of G. So yeah, maybe that bit of downforce will help a bit, just keeping the rear planted a bit more. I'm not really sure. We'll have to see there. Interior sport, and then with a premium cassette. So yeah, I'd say that's a fairly sensible option for a supercar. Something a bit sporty, bucket seats, more stripped out and lighter, but it's got nice entertainment and things. I think that's sort of what you'd expect. Very high safety, interestingly. Like, that thing is way over the safety minimum, which I suppose it sort of, you need to put a bit into safety, especially when you've got fiberglass panels, because they do not give you good safety at all. But yeah, it's not so needed to go that overkill. I wonder actually how standard does. Standard would be fine. Of course, the way to just weight, I suppose it will cause it to terminally oversteer a bit, so some retuning would be needed. And then suspension-wise, fairly equal camber and things. Yeah, so the setup, I suppose, is for comfort, somewhere in between. Yeah, maybe stiffen the rear a bit if you want to like properly line it up. These two. And I don't know. There's a million things you can do. Suspension tuning is quite hard, and again, air suspension, adaptive dampers, and yeah, overall, this car does have some weird choices, but I think in things like the aerodynamics and gearing, it does do some quite good setup and things. I think this could be maybe something quite interesting in BeamNG, especially with those narrow tyres and quite a bit of power. And yeah, stats like this. Usually sort of handling right on the line doesn't translate well into BeamNG because it's all oversteer. But if this is sort of the speed it's going into hairpins at sort of, like going around hairpins at sort of 40 miles an hour even is over the oversteer line, then potentially this could be quite formidable. And then like sort of longer corners it's doing more 60 or whatever, and it's starting to understeer and be stable, especially with that wing. Yeah, I don't know, this will be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to it. Final car of this video, from the almighty Twingo, the Nero Magnetica V12. And yeah, looking at this, I get sort of Toyota Century vibes. It's got a big V12, it's a black, sort of Japanese looking, I think it looks sort of Japanese, especially with the bonnet, mirrors and things, of fender mirrors, sorry. Yeah, saloon, well, coupe in this case, but yeah, just sort of a luxury car with a big engine. I think for the most part it looks maybe a bit too generic. I think almost it's maybe needs like some chrome trim or something around here, something to really make it look premium. Otherwise it does just look like sort of a base model saloon car or something with a V12 badge on the back, which I suppose makes it sort of sleeper, but it's not particularly imposing or anything. I also think actually the body that is used is maybe a bit too small for this. Maybe they were trying to go for something sportier, with like the sort of BBS style wheels and things, but I think then why go with a V12 if that's the sort of effect you're going to go for? Wouldn't you go for something smaller and sort of try and make something more M3 sort of performance, or M5, I guess. It's more of an M5. No, it's M3 sized, I think. Yeah. So yeah, that's sort of my thoughts about it. It does at least look very good. Quite good, at least in some areas. I think it's, as I said, missing trim and things. But I like things like the mirrors, the badge. I do think the sort of rear section does look quite nice, using these two different light fixtures. I think it just sort of fits the body nicely and the period, but it just doesn't look particularly super. So it's only going to get a 4 out of 10. If we take a look. And yeah, surprising no one double wishbone. Interestingly, just using steel as the panels, and only a galvanized chassis, so making changes there. But yeah, this is a big lazy V12. Again, more sort of Toyota Century inspiration potentially, in that it's just a big lazy engine, not really designed for peak power or anything. Hyperneutectic cast. I would say to get the emissions down, but it's well under, unless they're way more powerful than I remember. No, they're not. So yeah, I suppose the other benefit of hyperneutectic is it does get loudness down a bit. So if you're trying to get a bit more comfort, then that's always a good way to go. Although, be aware of production units, obviously. Yeah, that's always a neat little detail I don't think many people are aware of. And yeah, fairly low cam profile. Again, just give me this nice lazy sort of torque curve. Decently high compression at 10 to 1, although or 10.1 to 1, although way lower actually than some of the other cars. Then only a single intake, or single throttle, I suppose, on the multi-point EFI. Although it does have a performance intake, which seems a bit interesting. I can't decide if this car's going quiet or not. Yeah, and then just sort of a relatively sporty setup actually in terms of ignition timing, although it is quite lean, which does make sense. In fact, if we take a look at efficiency, yeah, it's actually decently efficient as an engine, although I suppose it is quite lazy, so that makes sense. But yeah, tubular headers, dual exhausts, and then straight through and reverse flow. Interestingly, it's still got some room on the engineering time. I was actually a bit worried that maybe V12s weren't quite as viable, because of the way that I'd created the rules. I think this car shows that V12s can still be used. Maybe they won't handle quite as well, but I think you can definitely get a lot more power out of this than they're showing here. No body quality or anything. It is rear-wheel drive. 5.9 seconds to 60 is 1,390. What? 1,539. I know how numbers work. Sorry about that. Yeah. I can read numbers. Yeah. 5.9 seconds to 60. So it's not the slowest car we've had. But it is the heaviest car we've had. And yeah, only does 165 miles an hour, I think, from my notes, with quite a bit of wheel spin. And it's not even geared that low, so yeah, I think it's all in the tyres. Yeah, 225s with sports compound, and I think just that a lot of weight means that yeah, it takes a bit more effort to accelerate it, and like maybe a slightly lower final drive than some of the other cars. Oh yeah, and it is a bit older. That can affect like sort of tyre grip and things. Quite a few things actually. Yeah. Brakes, bit of brake fade, probably not going to matter a lot, to be honest. And then yeah, some big brakes, kind of aggressive pads, but yeah, this is a fairly standard setup. I wouldn't say there's anything too weird going on there. It does apparently have some wings or lips. Yeah, there's a lip at the front there, and well, I suppose it only needs one to give you access to both sliders. But yeah, clearly not doing a lot. Car still makes 80 kilograms of lift at top speed, 90 even. Yeah, not really too concerning though when it weighs so much, but yeah. And then semi-clad under tray. Just I suppose to help top speed a bit. What's its drag coefficient? Yeah, it's not it's not too aerodynamic. 3.59. Or 0.359. What is it with mere numbers at the moment? I don't know. Bit of brake airflow. Again, pro not helping drag. And then yeah, the interior, very much a luxury car. Going for just being nice and comfortable. Prestige, maybe not as high as it could be. I suppose potentially limited by top speed. If we go into detailed stats actually, because I'm curious how something like this doesn't get something so high. And I'll be, I guess, little things like the chassis actually doesn't have aluminium panels. It's naturally aspirated. Doesn't have anything like too fancy, like the wheel to the small. It's like little things like that, I suppose. Yeah, I think also part of it being quite a small car. I say small car, but it's not huge if you know what I mean, considering it's a big, it's a V12 in the front of a coupe, but there we go. And yeah, hydropneumatic suspension, so that is quite interesting. Quite comfortable, I suppose, and yeah, actually almost 40 comfort. Makes sense there. And yeah, setup for comfort, slightly underdrive Bowtie. I'd say that's a pretty good setup for if you're going for comfort. I just don't think this really works as like a performance sort of supercar. I don't think it's quite outlandish enough. If this was, say, like, you know, it's like 5 meters long with yeah, you know, it's just like insanely long. Yeah, like 5 meters long. It's got like sort of chrome trim down the side and looks like it's owned by a dictator or something like that, and it's just like totally the intimidation mobile or something. Then I think this sort of thing could do quite well, but at the moment it just sort of feels like it's going nowhere, if you know what I mean. It's not quite committed enough, and I don't think with like a sporty stat like this it can really recover, even with decent enough prestige. I mean, it's nothing sort of outstanding, but yeah, I don't know, it's just my 2 cents on it, I guess. Although I am the judge, so I suppose that's the only one that matters, or the only opinion that matters. But yeah, there we go. Final car for this episode then. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this. And yeah, next time we'll review another 5 cars. And in the meantime, you'll also probably see a video from my test driver driving this cars. So you've got that to look forward to. Hopefully we should have some regular uploads and stuff now. But yeah, until then, goodbye.